Alright, Subaru Crosstrek 2014. Gonna do a tire rotation. We're at a little over 5,000 miles. I like to rotate every 5,000. And the way I do it is I go front. The front tires will go opposite corners to the back. Back tires come right to the front. So I'll show you the step-by-step process that I do to rotate tires. I will also be doing a front brake inspection because we're at about 61,000 miles. So equipment I use, 19 millimeter deep well impact socket. It's a 6-point, and then just on a Craftsman breaker bar, and I don't even know what this is. It's probably like let's say 18 inches or so. Could use a impact driver. I just choose not to because of snapping stuff off. And then just the amount of time it takes to get the cord out and everything set up, I could probably do it faster. So let me get set up here. Alright, so with the car still on the ground without jacking it up, I'm just going to break loose all of the lug nuts first. And I just do this by hand. Like I said, I could use my electric impact, but it just seems like this is easier. So I'll go around, loosen them all, and then the next step is going to be to lift the car. So the equipment I use to jack the car up, I'm using a 3-ton Craftsman jack. It's made in China. I think all floor jacks are. I would love to find one that isn't. I had a 4-ton Craftsman Professional, and I don't know, something snapped off in here in the jack. It's probably fixable, but is it worth the time? I mean, these jacks are so cheaply built, you can probably pick up another one for 150 bucks. I don't know if it's worth the time trying to order parts and pay shipping when you can just get a whole new brand new jack. And I don't know, I hear a lot of guys talking Harbor Freight's the way to go, that they got the cheapest jacks, and if they're all made in China anyway, what's the difference? So I use a floor jack, and then also I'm going to use a jack stand. In most cases I would use another jack if I had it. It's just a little bit easier to maneuver. So if you're not familiar with the Crosstreks or this type of car, these are unibody cars, so there is no frame. So where we're actually going to, and this is where I wish I had a nicer camera, right here, right in here is where you're going to put your, or actually I think right in here is where you're going to put your jack, but there's usually spots that are out in this little pinch part here where they got the two thinly pieces of sheet metal pinched together. The factory jack fits in one of those, and it's supposed to not fall out. They do make adapters, I've seen, for these plates that have more of a up and down with a slot, so that fits in that groove nice. I find if I just keep it between the points here, so it's not on the high parts of this part here, it should be okay. And then the other thing is, when you're doing it, you want to kind of think it out. So I know that this tire here is coming off and going to the back on the opposite side, and this one's coming to the front. So what I'll probably want to do is get my jack stand underneath there, because this will be probably the last tire I come back to. Because after I take that one off, I'll have the tire from the back up here I can put on, move this jack out, take this jack, go to the other side where that tire is going to go on the back, and then continue all the way through. And then this will be the last one, so that's where you would want your jack stand. I guess ideally, if you're doing this too, you should probably just use jack stands and not rely on a jack, but I'm not too worried about it. I've done this enough where I have had it slip off a jack and have the car fall down. It's not like I was there. I was trying to tighten lug nuts, and it slipped off and then fell forward. It wasn't really that big of a deal. You just got to kind of watch what you're doing. So, like I said here, I probably got this up too high. Let's see. So you want to kind of get this in there. Hold on once. Let me reposition. Alright, so just bringing this up. Want to kind of have that right where those 2 pinches are in that sheet metal. And then, like I said, I just want to make sure that it's not on the high spar of the lifting point there. And then I'm just gonna jack it up. Let me back up here and I'll show you what I'm doing. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do here is jack up this entire side of the car from the front of the car. I should be able to get the front up high enough where the back tire comes off the ground, and then I can stick my floor jack underneath here. Let's see if we can get this. So the front's off, back's getting close, there it is. So we get it up quite a ways. And then in the same spot as, see, this one's all bent up already. I don't know, I'm pretty sure they probably make jack stands as well for this. So in the same spot that I had the floor jack here, I'm just putting the jack stand. You can see the pinched part there. I'm just letting it sit in there. So we're going to let it down a little bit. Alright, so there we go. So just the way it is now, I got back tires off the ground, by quite a bit actually, and so is the front. So what I'll do is I'll start by taking the front off because I want to look at that anyway. Actually, maybe should I throw another jack stand in there and take the jack out completely? That's tough to do. Let me see here. Let me think about this. Okay, so I removed the lug nuts from both tires here, pulled them both off. Here's the back. The back, I'm not going to worry about doing a brake inspection. Most of your braking power is in the front of the car. I would say like 70% and then 30% in the rear. So really those brake pads should be fine. I mean, you could check them. I'm not going to worry about it. I am going to check the front though. I usually go through and check the tires too to see if there's any wear. Everything looks pretty good. You can check the tires too to make sure you don't have something in them like a screw or nail. So getting to the brake inspection part of this video here. So you have 2 nuts or 2 bolts that you're going to want to take off. There's one on top here and then there's one on the bottom right there. Those are 14 millimeter, and so that holds, oops, this is hard to do. This holds your caliper on. So you take this bolt out, the one on the bottom here, and then this whole piece will come off. Will come off like this, and that holds your 2 brake pads on. And then we can take a look and see. You can just take a visual inspection here of the rotor. There's no grooves worn into it, so that's good. Usually the front side though is not going to be the side that has issue. Usually the back, which you can't see, is sometimes tricky. Also, if you start with the driver's side, this should be the side that has the most wear typically because it's closest to the master cylinder. Sometimes that's not the case depending on how they run the brake lines and stuff. But I know on older cars typically the driver's side is usually the side that has more wear, I guess, than the passenger side. So let me set up and get this caliper taken off. I don't know about this camera. I really need to get a different camera for this. Alright, so just like on all the good automotive shows and this old house, I'm just going to remove these. So you're going to want to think it through. Now, back side through, so loosening, we're going to want to go this way, so it's just down, which is pretty simple. Wow, those go easy. It's almost as if somebody had broken them loose off camera and now comes back. Thanks, Norm. Now back to you. Just like this old house. So same thing with the bottom here. I'm using, it's 14 millimeter socket, works. This on top here we got a brake line, so I'm just using a 14 millimeter Craftsman wrench. So these bolts are pretty short. They're pretty fragile too. These you could snap these off pretty easily. They're pretty small. Wouldn't take much to snap these off. They look good. So now this part here should be able to just kind of pull this back and forth. That'll get your caliper off, and we can look at the brake pads. Doesn't look too bad. A little rusty, to be expected, I guess. So you want to make sure too that that doesn't fall down or hang by the hose, because that wouldn't be terrible. Holy cow, these brakes look amazing yet. So like I said, there's 61,000 miles on here. Let me grab the other light so you can see better. And I was thinking these brakes were starting to get worn. I know on my Crown Victoria that time I changed at 60,000 miles, and I kept the old brake pads, and I ended up putting them on at a later date because they weren't as bad. So if you look here, there's actually quite a bit of pad left at 61,000, and you can see in the pad there's like a little slot. It's not even close to being down to the bottom of that slot. So you got quite a ways to go. So that's amazing actually. And this is, like I said, on the driver's side. In the back of the pad, obviously it looks like it's got more wear than the front. There is a lot of braking power on there. A lot of brake left. That's amazing. That's good. It means I don't have to mess with that. So, also I did put a jack stand underneath the front here, just because my jack keeps losing its altitude here. So what we're going to do is just put that back on. Okay, so we'll put the caliper back on. So that's pretty cool. I expected more wear, I guess, but we do a lot of highway driving, so I guess that's part of the reason why they're good yet. So it may happen here, we'll see, but sometimes, so this is a 2-piston caliper here. We got 2 separate pistons. Sometimes these pistons work their way out when you take them off. If that's the case and you can't slide them on, what you could do is take a C-clamp and just clamp it on and run them back in always, but it doesn't appear that that's going to be an issue here. Looks like it's fine. Let's see here, the bottom one isn't quite in. There we go. Yep. Alright, and then when you run these bolts in, this bolt here to me just looks like it would take not much to twist off. It just looks very soft, like the head would twist right off. So obviously you're not going to give it a lot. I took it off with this, and it didn't take much force. There's not a lot of leverage there, so it doesn't hold much on. I don't know, you could probably look up the torque spec on it, but I've never looked at that. I think the only time I torque spec something is when I changed the entire brake assembly on the front of my Mustang, and when I went from single piston calipers to dual calipers, and oops, I changed the rotor size and all that other stuff. Add that screw in there. There it is. So I wouldn't go too tight with them. Just once they snug up, that's all. I wouldn't give them much more than that, because it's not going to take much, like I said, to snap those off. It's more than enough. Not going to go anywhere. So, just like I said then, I'm going to take the tire from the rear, moving that up to the front. So, and I just did a visual inspection here. Looks pretty good. Probably take that. See, it's on the jack stand right now because we lost that much height, because this floor jack is so amazing. Take that out of there. There we go. There you go. I'm going to make sure it's on, lined up. What I like to do is get one started. If you do use an electric impact, I suggest not starting them with it, because if you don't have them on right, you will cross thread your lugs, or not your lugs, your studs. Well, maybe your lugs too. Your studs probably for sure, so I wouldn't do that. I just go through and kind of go hand tight on all of them with the socket here. I'll do that. You don't need to watch me do that. Alright, so I got them all just hand tight. So now what I'm going to do is just kind of go around in the star pattern and just put enough on there so the wheel's not going to fall off or not be seated correctly when I drop the jack down. And then I'll come back and I will use a torque wrench to check them. So, let's see here, let's get this out of the way. This area shouldn't go on the other side, I suppose. Alright, so I'm just going to drop the jack down here. Always a good idea too to drop the jack slowly. Okay, so opposite side, same type of deal. I'm going to go to the back and jack that up. Alright, so I got all the lug nuts off, jacked it up same way I did on the other side. This is the rear of the Crosstrek. I'm just going to pull that tire off. You do a quick visual inspection, or if you want, take more time. The wear in this tire, again, looks just as good. Doesn't appear to have anything in the tire. I'm going to take the tire from, this would be the front driver's side now, putting that in the back. I guess, again, if you want, because we're here now, you can do a quick visual just to see what everything looks like, but I said it's hard to see the back. And usually, like I said, the pads in the rear of the car are never going to be bad. It's going to be the front before the rear because it does the majority of your stopping power. You can kind of take a look at all your suspension components, make sure nothing's bent up, but this is a pretty new car. So rust is about average for Wisconsin. So there you go, that looks good. I don't see any oil or grease or anything like that leaking out anywhere, so that's good too. So now all we're going to do is just slide the front driver's side tire on the rear passenger side. Let's see if I can do a better job of getting this on. I hate blocking the camera, but there's no way around it. There we go. Again, I'm just going to run these on by hand. So, I know some guys do different. Some will take one lug nut and tighten it down so that if does something slips out. Like I said, I'm not completely worried about that. I go hand tight on them all first. So again, I'm going to stop the camera here, tighten them up. Okay, so front side here on the passenger side. I'm going to check the brakes. I thought maybe based on what I saw on the driver's side I wouldn't check it, but just looking in between the bracket here, it doesn't look so good. Now remember, on the other side of the car, so now if we went down, it's actually going to turn that bolt tighter, so we're going to want to go the opposite direction. It's going to be up. See, and that didn't take much at all. There's not much to that. So those are loose. These look like they're down there. These look like they're pretty flat based on what I can see, which is sad if that's the case. So it means I'm going to have to do brakes probably. So again, pull our caliper off, kind of gently set it up there without breaking anything. Okay, and I guess I was just seeing things because this looks pretty good. So just as I suspected here, looks pretty much just like the other side. Again, you can see the slot in the pad. Oops, right here. You can see that slot. That's got a long ways to go before that's going to be down a ways. So I guess if you were inspecting pads, you could pull them all up. So you could pull the pad out. I'm not going to do this though. And you could run a little grease or oil on this guide here and then on the bottom so that that pad moves in and out freely. Also on your pistons, what some guys like to do is pull this rubber piece back. So you pull that back, squirt a little bit of 30 weight back in there and just make sure that piston is free, because what sometimes happens, well at least this happened a lot on our Hyundai Santa Fe, the pistons would freeze and you end up with a brake that was dragging and you end up with a really hot brake or rotor because it was dragging a little bit. These though, you can tell, seem like they're pretty free, so that's good. Oh, that is just amazing that those pads are still good. So those are some things you could do. Disclaimer on this whole video, I am not an expert, and now my heater's running in here. I could try turning it off, I suppose. I'm not an expert in Subarus or Japanese cars. The Subaru and the Nissan we have, those are like basically brand new. I've never worked on those. I'm a Ford guy, I guess, for the most part, but haven't had a Ford in a while. Had a GM once and would never buy one again with Monte Carlo, and that was nothing but issues. So, and I wasn't real impressed with the quality on a GM. Now, it may be just that model, but you know, it's all it took was just having that one model, and now I really don't want anything to do with it. And everywhere we went, though, people thought that Monte Carlo was something. And maybe it was just GM guys, but everyone's like, "Oh, you got a Monte Carlo," and it was in a laser blue metallic. I mean, it was a sharp-looking car. Looked really nice. Had power moonroof. You know, it was pretty much loaded. And that was a 3.4 liter. But we just had like dumb issues with it. There's either valve cover gaskets or intake gaskets that were bad, and I thought that was kind of a 3.1 deal on the GMs. Something else was leaking on it too. We had problems with the radio cutting out, not working all the time. Like that, to me, that's just frustrating stuff. So definitely not an expert in Subarus or Japanese-made cars. I probably will be after we get rid of these and go with something else. But if I were to get something new or different, I really like the idea of that Ford Bronco, if that's an actual full-size, based on a full-size frame. But who knows? You never really know what they're going to do with those concept cars. They've been talking Ford Bronco for a long time. So, I mean, these are okay. They're not bad. They don't have a lot of performance. I mean, based on what I had a Crown Victoria, and that thing had a heck of a lot more power for the size car it was, and based on the size engine. Crown Victoria was a nice car. This car obviously is amazing though in snow. It does a much better job than what the Crown Victoria would do. Although, Crown Victoria with a good set of snow tires will hold its own. Just to talk about these tires briefly here. These Firestone FR 710s, for 5,000 miles, I guess a little over 5,000 miles, they're not terrible. They're definitely not amazing in snow or anything like that. I would have preferred the Yokohama Geolanders compared to what these are. But price point, these were half as much, so I guess you kind of get what you pay for. And really, I mean, if you got to deal with it in a few snowstorms, and then the rest of the time you're not driving in snow, it's not that big of a deal. Not really great in ice either, so. But it's definitely right where price comes in. Okay, so I got all the tires put back on. Just finished with the back driver's side here. Gonna pull out our jack and get it hooked up. And we're just gonna let her back down. Okay, so the last step of this, if you were paying attention, I'm going to use the torque wrench here to tighten these down. So I'm using that same socket as before, the 19 millimeter Craftsman 6-point. Just putting that on a Craftsman torque wrench here, 1/2-inch drive. And then you want to set it. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this or not. Probably not. We get too much light. Maybe you can see it, so it says stop, and then as you turn it, numbers are going up. You probably can't see the numbers. It's not going to focus, huh? Kinda. Nope, not really. So if you don't have a torque wrench, I guess I never used a torque wrench ever until recently. What does it say? Is that 41? I think so. Am I going the wrong way? Nope, 52. I don't know what these are supposed to be torqued at. I can tell you, however, from experience that you don't want to torque them to 100 foot-pounds because you will strip something. So I'm torquing these to 80 foot-pounds, which should be more than enough, or 108 Newton meters, whatever that is. Yeah, I used to just, back in the day, I would just use this right here, this 18-inch breaker bar, and I would just snub them up. But since then, I've been using that torque wrench, and I always thought, oh, 100 pounds, that should be good. That's holding your wheel on. That's kind of an important part of your car. Turns out for at least this type of car, or maybe the Japanese models, that's too much based on the lug nut or stud. So in Crown Victoria, I always went 100. I didn't even think twice about it. So on the starter pattern here, I'm just going to go through and go. So I'll just go around here once. So that one's pretty close. That one's not yet. That one seems really loose. So you're just listening for the click. Wait, I don't know. Maybe 80's too much for this too. So that looks good. You just want to make sure that you're sucking the hub in evenly to the, or sucking the wheel into the hub evenly, so you got it on there so you don't have any issues. So I'm going to go around and do that with the other three now. Alright, so this is the last one here. Just finishing up. I know too, when I took it in and had the tires on, I used never seize or anti-seize on all of the studs. The guy said, no, you can't do that. That screws up our machine when we torque them. I suppose they're using some sort of electronic torque thing, and they probably are figuring on a dry torque setting. I don't know about all that. I still like using anti-seize on that. I know some guys do. It's also not a bad idea if you got a steel wheel to put some around where the wheel meets up with the hub, because sometimes they like to, if they haven't been taken off in a while, they start to rust together there a little bit. So there you go, Subaru Crosstrek. This is at 61,000 miles. Check the front brakes, did a tire rotation, all those good things. So if you do have questions or comments, just leave them in the section below and I'll get back to you on it.